Minister of Family and Community Services, providing him with first-hand experience in federal policymaking and party dynamics. After leaving Parliament, Benjamin, otherwise known as Punters Politics, which is the platform that uses satire and plain-speaking commentary to make Australian politics accessible to everyday voters. A former high school teacher, Konrad has built a substantial following across Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok by breaking down complex political issues like corporate lobbying, gas royalties, and election reform into relatable short-form content. His work has been credited with re-engaging younger Australians in the political discourse, particularly those disillusioned with traditional media narratives, aiming to empower citizens to understand and participate in the political process. Next up, we have good old Michael West. Mr. West is a Walkley Award-winning investigative journalist and founder of Michael West Media, established in 2016 to pursue independent reader-funded journalism focused on corporate influence over democracy. In 2020, he launched The West Report, a YouTube channel focused on delivering sharp, accessible commentary on political and economic power structures. Michael West's journalism has been directly attributed to changing the laws in Australia. And finally, we have Steph Preston. Steph Preston is a former political advisor from both sides of the aisle in Canberra, as well as contributor and occasional host of The West Report here on YouTube. She brings insider knowledge to her reporting with a special interests in factions and power. Her investigative work has shed light on issues such as alt-right infiltration in the Young Nationals, fringe conservative movements more broadly, and events about which she's compelled to say, no comment. And my name is Josh, I'm the producer and coordinator here at The West Report and Michael West Media. Let's get into it.
G'day, Josh. Are we live, mate?
We certainly are, Mick.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming on. Stellar array, and thanks for YouTube audience tuning into this live broadcast, this live stream on YouTube. We've got a lot to talk about here because there's been changes at the top of the leadership of three of the biggest political movements in the country. And of course, there's the only one really of any size is Albo with his 93, 94 seats. The count is still going. Albo is no chance of a leadership spill. And that is the issue. Ross Cameron, former Liberal Party minister, that is the issue, of course, for the Libs, isn't it? They're looking at a 50-seat deficit, and the chance of making that up in one term is extremely remote. How do you think they're looking, and what do you think of the ascension of Sussan Lee to the Liberal Party leadership?
Well, taking your questions in reverse order, I did actually sit next to Sussan Lee in Parliament for a term, and it's sort of like school allocated seating, and the colleague you wind up next to has an impact on your quality of life. And I can tell you that just as another Australian, to get stuck sitting next to Sussan Lee for 3 years is no hardship at all. She's a perfectly congenial, thoughtful, indeed, I would say often quite charming person. If I give you all the upside, she's had quite a diverse life experience. Her seat of Farrer is very large and quite diverse. It's got the rural, rustic background, which I like to see. I don't like our leaders to be just cocooned, within a 5-kilometre radius of the ABC at Ultimo or something. She's a pilot. She worked for the Australian Tax Office. She grew up travelling the Middle East. Her father is described to me as a diplomat. I think you might say an intelligence asset, but don't quote me. I'm not 100% sure. But she's a bit unorthodox in some respects, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, she was one of the founding members of the Parliamentary Friends of the Palestinian Authority, which makes her a bit unusual within the Liberal Party, and could, I think the Jewish community will be watching pretty closely to see if they detect any change of approach. But as Punter said before we got on the stream, Sussan is, in my judgment, the sort of compromise candidate She is the centre of the centre. She's the place you go to when you sort of don't want to go somewhere else. And to your second question, which is, where is the Liberal Party positioned? I would say that they are in a very great degree of difficulty. They are the biblical calf in the ditch, needing someone to pull them out. And as much as I like Sussan personally, I am sceptical. I mean, in a way, as an Australian, I would like her to succeed, but I am sceptical, and she's widely being discussed as a sort of a placeholder. And if rather than just sort of smearing or slagging off, I mean, what I say is what Seneca said, that, if a bloke does not know the port to which he is sailing, then no wind is favourable. And the truth is, I would say, for both the Liberal and National parties, they don't know to which port they're sailing. And the question of, whether a particular person is right or wrong for a leadership role, I think it depends entirely on what it is you're trying to achieve. What is the port you are trying to reach? What is your objective as a political party? And at the moment, both the Liberals and Nationals are hopelessly divided. We can discuss, what is the fissure, the sort of topography of that division. But they're hopelessly divided, and they are sticking both parties with a kind of status quo approach. And I think the prospects are not good.
Ross, do you think they will be sailing to the port of nuclear Neverland?
Well, I see
is that policy still on the table now that the election defeat has been so great? What are there voices? You must be hearing voices saying we're going to have to dump that policy, or are they all as one sailing to nuclear Neverland?
Well, look, all I would say to you, since I know that, we haven't touched on the Teals and who leads the Teal party, to which you will no doubt say, oh, they're not a party. They're a group of fully independent, autonomous local candidates. But indeed, if you go to find the Teal from Central Casting,
so it looks like Ross may have cut out there on his end, unfortunately.
She lives in Mossman. Her husband is an orthopaedic surgeon. She's in a 5-bedroom house, but all the kids have got up and moved away. She used to be an Anglican, but she's lost her faith. And she's desperate for a moral cause, and hung up in her hallway when you walk into the Mossman pile is a very large portrait that says Michael West Media, because you are giving her a moral cause.
Well, Ross, I think you're over-exaggerating my importance to the world, mate, but they...
No, I think nuclear could still be on the table, not least because Donald Trump has just made an announcement in the last 36 hours to a massive United States commitment to nuclear, including, if necessary, using the US Armed Forces to, protect and support the construction effort. So when you've got the Europeans who are now saying nuclear is a form of renewable energy, you've got, modular nuclear reactors being delivered quite quickly. Indonesia has just in the last month, I think, also made a significant commitment to nuclear. So whilst ever all of our regional neighbours and our trade competitors are committing themselves more deeply to nuclear, including new nuclear, I guess it's still on the table.
Okay, so you're not hearing too many whispers about it being turfed out as a coalition policy. And just tell me quickly, while we've got you up front, Ross, on the parties that we haven't discussed, because we're about to hop into the Greens and the Nats, but on the parties we haven't discussed, the minority parties of the right, how did you see them fare? We've obviously had Clive's trumpeter patriots trying to coalesce all those independent forces of the right. I mean, are the Liberals then, because they're going centrist, more centrist that is, are they going to pick up votes, do you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think there's a sense in which, Sussan Lee's elevation is good for the Libertarian Party, which is, my own party, which has not done well in the last election. We suffered as the Liberal Party's primary vote continued to fall. We actually went backwards in the election. I regret it. I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. We're not seeing, but we have seen, for example, in the UK, all of the minor right is looking to Nigel Farage. And I know that the West family has got a particular interest in Westminster, but Nigel Farage is looking like he could really be the next Prime Minister. And he's, after the recent by-election and extraordinary council results for the Reform Party, you're seeing this wind blowing into the sail of what you might call the alternative right, what I would call the authentic, rational right, whereas the mainstream parties, the Liberals and Nationals, are just like the chameleon lizard or the cephalopod, the octopus, that it lands on the rock, and the National Party just completely takes on the shape, the texture, the contour, the characteristics of the rock on which it lands. It has no inherent or intrinsic ballast or belief system. It's just a widget in a machine with zero conviction. And so long as that continues to be the case, fond libertarians, will benefit from it.
Will pick up. Yeah, well, I refer to the major parties there on the right as the crony capitalists versus the sort of more authentic capitalists, because there seems to be never on the right much reticence to take government handouts. And that was the problem with this nuclear thing, it was all about this massive price tag funded by the public. But look, if we could just quickly, because obviously Albo has successfully gone to the middle, and Australians vote strongly to the middle, compulsory voting and so on. And that's been a successful thing for him. Too much flip-flopping on the right, too much fudging with policy and so on. And so if I just move to everybody for one moment and ask everybody's opinion on what's going to happen then at the other side of the spectrum with the Greens, who's going to get up? Which of three candidates will get up tomorrow? Who would you like to get up tomorrow to be the contestant on the left of politics? Who do you think would be most effective? Ross, can we have your one first, please, mate?
Oh, well, as I understand it, the Greens are divided factionally between the sort of Tory tree huggers, the sort of urban, white, tertiary educated sort of climate change enthusiasts, and the so-called watermelons, who are green on the outside, red on the inside, really hardcore sort of Marxist or post-Marxist, at least socialist, and who are also deeply committed to the identity politics of sort of race and sexuality. So you've got a more sort of purist ideological faction and a more sort of pragmatic, do deals with Labor, don't hold too tightly to core principles. In a sense, I don't really mind. I mean, 1 out of 50, I say the Greens get it right and are in effect the only party that gets it right, which I would say was the case in relation to Julian Assange, where the Greens were a phalanx in support of Julian, in support of a key principle, where, Liberal, much of the Labor Party, although we have to say, Albo did in the end get him out. So look, I just prefer, I suppose, a more pragmatic Greens leader than a hardcore sexuality, racism, and tear the joint down leader.
So, Konrad, can we bring you in? Konrad from Punters Politics. What's your take? Why do you think?
Well,
lost ground.
I was out and about during election time, and I tell you what, I've never come across these watermelon communists masquerading as Greens. I thought, from what I saw, the Greens, like I can see the appeal of the tree hugger Greens that seem to what people think the Greens have always been. Maybe they have, I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to politics for that long. But there's the tree hugger Greens, but this kind of, at least Adam Bandt sort of Greens, they were very clear on their messaging. Like every time I was walking past a voting booth, making Instagram reels about them, they're very clear. Dental in Medicare was one of the big things, taxing big corporations, those sorts of things, which is very interesting with Ross's take there, because like I had a chat with a few like libertarian style people, and they're also like wanting to crack down on tax policy that seems to be letting corporations price gouge a bit. So as far as where the Greens go, I think it'll be interesting, because I didn't mind some of the policies that make these corporate tax budgets pay tax sort of angle with the dental and Medicare. It was pretty clear. It was pretty there. They kind of didn't hammer. I mean, at least in the lead up to the election, I didn't see them hammering the culture wars as heavily as I've seen some people in the party do. I think they were pretty clear and on message, but it didn't seem to get them up. I don't think it was the destruction that the Sky News pundits would describe it as, but they also didn't get up. So yeah, are they gonna change strategy? Is a good question.
Steph, what's your take? You worked for as an advisor to politicians of all stripes, from the Nationals to the Libs to the Labor. Probably not the Greens, but I think maybe the Greens.
Yeah, I have worked across a few different parties for sure, a few different offices, that kind of thing. Yeah, I definitely agree with Konrad that the culture war stuff, you know, one of the last talents, well, not last because he's new, sort of, if he gets the seat. I think they did call it for Tim Wilson. You know, he's in a gay relationship and is married, he has a husband, and so as far as like pushing a sort of homosexual agenda, as I think Ross called it, goes, like, you know, that's out the window really. As far as the Greens go, I think that the vote sort of galvanized around Albanese, probably because, you know, most people don't think about politics most of the time in between elections. So they would have looked, you know, on election day or whenever they voted and said, oh, you know, I think it might have been a Peter Dutton thing. And they said, oh God, that guy. And wanted to make sure that he was not going to get in again. And I think that might have been an effect on all sides, away from the Greens, away from the Liberals, obviously. Not so much the National Party, though. They always hold their seats.
And they have held their seats very, very, very nicely. They've held their seats with 1/3, I think, of the Greens' overall vote. Is it a fair system, Ross?
Our electoral system.
Our electoral system.
Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh, look, you know, every system is imperfect. I think it's a system that rewards incumbents. I think in every system, in every bureaucracy over time, it becomes self-serving. And so it finds a way to look after its own. And so even down to something as small as, you know, we as the Libertarian Party sort of struggled away for, Liberal Democrats as we then were, for a very long time without winning a seat in the New South Wales Parliament. When we finally cracked it in the last state election, getting John Ruddock elected, we immediately become entitled to $400,000 a year of taxpayer funding for administrative costs of running a political party. So that gives us a massive benefit, as a significant benefit as an incumbent. You know, and the incumbents, Liberal and Labor, can, if you like, gang up together to say to us as Liberal Democrats, you're not allowed to have that word, that party name, because we own the word Liberal. Even at the time, they were locking down Australian cities for kind of 2 years and forcing experimental drugs into children's bodies, but they owned the word Liberal. So, look, every system is imperfect. First past the post has a range of recommendations, and say, you know, in the UK, we're seeing the emergence of Farage in part because he can benefit from an alternative electoral system.
And Konrad, what would you criticise about the electoral system here? Have you got any serious bugbears about it? How would you reform it? We haven't got on, of course, yet just to that point about which Ross almost touched on, the point about the Liberal and Labor move, the last electoral reforms from last year, which capped the parties but tend to favour the two major parties. But just overall, you founded the preferential voting. Is that the system we should be having, and how would you tweak it?
Yeah, I reckon, I mean, as far as other electoral system goes, like the system we see overseas in the US and the UK, I think they bloody suck. I saw in the last UK election, people were trading votes with people in different postcodes to go, my party I want doesn't stand a shot in my electorate, but they do in yours, and your party wants to do well in mine. So we'll trade votes and I'll vote for who. Like this kind of 4D chess that some people in different countries are playing so that they can vote for who they want first. I think every system has its quirks, and preferential voting, as we're finding out right now, has some interesting quirks, because when the Libs do so badly, really badly, like they're at the level of a minor party. I was looking at the ABC vote data where the vote share of independent and minor parties is now higher than the coalition got. Like the Liberal Party itself is now on the cusp of being a minor party because we get the choice of putting other people first, and over the last 30 years we've all shifted to being around the center, whereas just over a third of all votes are not going to the major two parties, which I think is a bloody great system. When two major parties entrench themselves, like Ross was kind of saying, they serve themselves. The preferential voting system gives us an option out to give us more competition injected into the system. That's where these independents came from, because the Liberal Party dropped the ball so much on their moderate sort of middle base, pretended climate change was happening, pretended their electorates didn't care about it. Like watching Josh Frydenberg kind of dance his way around in a debate with Monique Ryan, being like, half his party doesn't think climate change is real, but this electorate is like, we want you to do something about it. And Josh Frydenberg's like, I can't kind of say anything. I think it injects competition into a system, but it is interesting to see what happens to, let's say, parties like the Greens when the Liberal Party does so bad and you've got the 3-horse race. Whoever gets eliminated first, whether it's the Liberal or Labor, might determine whether it's a Green seat or a Labor seat. And I think the Libs, what we're seeing is the Libs did so badly that like Labor absolutely dominated, but with only a tiny bit more in their primary vote than last time. So, I think it's the best one we got, open to reform, but haven't seen a better one anywhere else.
So 34, well, the numbers are the 34% of the vote or thereabouts for 94 seats. So it is a resounding victory with 34% of the vote. Steph, have you got any criticisms of the system as it stands?
Must I have criticisms? I think I'm mostly with Konrad on this.
3-year terms or 4? Can we have a round on that?
Well, look, I think 4 might get a little bit more done, but I also think that if you can win consecutive elections, as it looks like, I mean, Albanese just won his second, right? And John Howard was the last one that we saw get a lot done, for better or worse, during his term. So if you can get enough people to vote for you and have a majority government, then you do get to do long-term things. So 4 years, sure. 3 years, sure. I'm not sure it would make that much of a difference. But as far as the voting system goes, I mean, Kos Samaras was the one who said this, and I think he said it on election night, that the right-wing parties, their preferences don't tend to go back to the Liberal Party. They go all over the place. I think that's what he said. And on the left, if you vote for the Greens, pretty much always goes back to Labor as your second preference. So 1 Greens and then 2 Labor. If you're in the anti-Dan Andrews party or the anti-vaccine party or whatever, the Christian, all that stuff, they don't, and Pauline as well, they just don't have for whatever reason, the discipline to get all their votes to go back to the Liberal Party. And that would reflect in the low primary votes that we see for both of the major parties. So they're lower than ever, as Konrad said, 1/3 of voting independent or whatever else. So it makes sense for votes to be going like that. And I'm not sure what it would actually take for the right-wing parties to get their voters to unify and maybe follow a how to vote card. And also, I'm not sure that the how to vote cards from either party really are doing what's in the best interests of people. You know, the Liberal Party preferenced Labor above, you know, the Greens or whatnot in a few seats. So, you know, I say the voting system is fine.
Game, isn't it? Like that's the power game.
Yeah, no one cares about voting.
They just want the power, and that's what we saw them go. We just want to win. Here's our competition. It's not these parties aren't putting the vote card out to go, well, if you want someone second most aligned to the values we hold, it would be them, then them, then them. And what we just saw was going, nah, Greens are actually a big threat, so we're going to drop someone else above them, even though they might be ideologically closer. And I think, from my punter's perspective, this is the kind of BS power games that the major parties play to entrench themselves that I think we're all bloody sick of.
Ross, is there any chance, you know, them getting back? I mean, Labor would look invincible for 2 terms now, so 6 years. What's your view on where it's all going? Is Albo therefore going to succumb to, will he be voting with the Libs? Will the Libs be voting with him, or will it be the Greens? Will he just stick doggedly to the centre? And will the Libs, you know, I mean, because if people are splintering off to the right, is there a chance of the coalition? Well, it's already been speculated on, might just put up their hand and we'll just go with somebody else on the right, or a coalition of parties on the right. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think the right is febrile, is fluid. It's obviously fractured, as Steph says, that, you know, our vote splinters all over the joint. And libertarians are not good at following how to vote cards, and that's why they are libertarians. They don't like being told what to do. But I reckon there is, when people just look at the Liberal Party branch member, feels like they are standing on a block of ice, and it's just melting underneath them. The primary vote just continues to melt. It's only going in one direction. And I think with the levels of division in the Federal Party, and, you know, the result, the Sussan Lee versus Angus Taylor, I think it was 29-25. I'm not, you may correct me, but something like, it was close, fairly close. You know, I reckon there is real room for the emergence of a major alternative which could pull. I mean, we saw Javier Milei, the libertarian in Argentina, who came out of nowhere in a calcified, breaking down, slowly eroding system, and emerged and built something brand new out of nothing to become the president of, you know, of Argentina. And I think he's quite likely to be re-elected. He's doing a terrific job. I think it's possible that the right sort of talisman, to use a probably inappropriately gendered noun, the right combination of personality and policy has the potential to really unthread the jumper. And I think it's possible. I have a range of theories about what it might look like, all highly speculative. But at the moment, it's just an argument about how fast or slow should Australian decline continue to be. And the Liberal and National parties are saying, well, we wish to preside over a slower version of Australian decline. And Labor and the Greens are saying, well, we wish to have a more rapid version of Australian decline.
So I might jump in here, lads. You can't see me for some reason. That's... why can't you see my camera? That's annoying. I might, before Ross has to go, I'm going to bring up a Patreon question. So if you guys aren't aware that we do have Patreon-only questions if you subscribe on our Patreon channel, and I feel like this was an apt one to put up due to your comments before Ross. So I might get Ross to answer it first, but we've got, here we go. Let me get rid of that other comment. So Ica from the Patreon asks us, will the new LNP leader outlast Lettuce, aka Liz Truss? I'm sure you know what we're talking about
Yes, I do. Well, I mean, Liz Truss was in a situation where she announced a reform project, which I was broadly supportive of. I was welcoming of it, but it did represent a threat to a number of major corporate vested interests, particularly in financial services, the kind of interests that Michael West spends his life,
Being interested in.
holding accountable. And they decided that she had to go. Essentially, London as a financial centre said, no, we don't want Liz Truss. We don't want these reforms. And so they teamed up with the mainstream media to destroy Liz Truss. Now, let me say, I don't wish to put a voodoo on Sussan Ley. I mean, she's only just arrived. It's possible that she will surprise. Very often you don't know how someone is going to perform until the mantle of leadership is placed on their shoulders. And then they either rise to the occasion or implode underneath it. I don't see, and I think that the single most important thing for a leader to connect with the electorate is the leader must believe their own story. And as Punter was talking about, Josh Frydenberg sort of prevaricating and flipping between what he had to do to hold his seat and the reality of, that anthropogenic climate change is the most speculative, specious, garbage, irredeemably crap theory ever produced by the industrial estate. And I don't see where the conviction comes from out of Sussan Ley as a leader. She's basically saying, oh, I'm not something else. Well, I say, Sussan, what are you?
Awesome, mate. I might throw to Steph for that next one. Steph, do you have anything to add to that Patreon question at all? Or anything you want to push back on?
Yeah, I think that she will outlast the letters and the Liz Truss thing. I'm not sure exactly when this happened, but it was fairly recently. Both major parties ended up increasing the amount of the party room vote that is needed to oust a leader. It was 50%. And now I think in both parties, I'm sure Ross can correct me if otherwise, you need 75% of the party room to roll a leader. So on that alone, I don't think we're going to see the Rudd-Gillard, Abbott, Turnbull, Scott Morrison style backstabbing going on anywhere near the near future. And I also agree with Ross when he said, you don't know until you see someone has been pushed forward to see what they can do. As far as like climate and energy go for Sussan Ley, I mean, she's from the Riverina. I'm from her electorate. That's where I was born. She's put herself as a moderate. I don't think that because Albury is not a place and Griffith and so on in the division of Farrer where energy production is, an industry. Maybe there's one or two spots, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but we haven't seen her as someone who's on the forefront. She did have the Environment Ministry for a little while, but no, it'll be interesting to see whether they stick to nuclear or whether they decide maybe we can compromise a little bit and get some green energy in there as well. I know a lot of farmers, especially in the south of the country, Queensland's one thing, but, Gippsland is another, whether we can compromise a little bit on some things that are at least electric, if not, renewables and making new solar panels and all this kind of thing. So, yeah, I think it will be really interesting. And I think it's also really interesting that they ended up going with Sussan Ley because it could have easily been Nat Canavan and Jacinta Price, So that would be a very different place for them to start from. I think they have to,
I like the fact that they've been progressive and appointed a woman. I think that actually helps them. And as both of you said, you never know.
Appointing a woman makes them progressive, but okay.
No, it's a good option.
It does for the Liberals. It does for the Liberals. But,
I guess for them it's progressive.
For them it's progressive, exactly. And but as you both say, it's impossible because, of course, being a party leader is a completely different gig. It's like being a journalist versus an editor. They're just different skills. And so, not entirely, but they're different, same trade, but different skills. So we don't know how she's going to go. She could go very well, but she's got, just on the maths, to get 50 seats, they've got a long haul ahead of them, a long haul. And there's a fair call to say that it's a bit of a poison chalice and that somebody will come and knock her off in 3 or 4 years' time. Ross?
Well, how good
very
can
seldom.
you go being the leader of a party which seems to be so held by the nuts by the Nationals that every leader they've had has been pushed, like just the whole debacle, Abbott, Turnbull. Like Turnbull couldn't do anything. As soon as Turnbull went,
Nationals are too
you know
good.
what, I think as soon as climate change, I think, is a thing, he's out of there. So the question is like leaders, like everyone's like, oh, you know, Angus Taylor or Sussan Ley, like which one optically looks better? Yeah, Susan's the better choice for optics. But my question is, we've just discussed policy before. Are they going to change their policy? Are they going to reassess their policy? Are they going to offer anything? Are they going to bring anything to the election? Like, question to you, Westy, like, does the leader actually get any say over policy, or are they just trying to manage the factions so they can stay in power? That's all I remember from Turnbull's stint. He was just sitting there going, okay, now how do I say I believe in climate change, but like also don't for the rest of the people who hold the power in this party? Like, how much power does a leader have, Westy?
Well, I think, this is a very good point because, and it goes to the money in politics, the original Patreon question, you know, and Ross's point about UK politics and money there with Liz Truss. I mean, the fact is, what's going to happen now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, on this, but the Liberal Party room will get together, the treasurer or whoever will do a review on the electoral performance, and they'll work out, we don't know how fair income they're going to be and introspective about, you know, the real issues, but they're going to have a look at it and go, this is why we lost here. This is why we lost there. I mean, we just published a story about how they lost the veterans, a good deal of the veterans votes in some key seats in Queensland to the Greens. I mean, you know, veterans are typically Liberal voting people, typically, not always. But the point is that, you know, they're going to do a review now, and this would be the process. Ross, you'd have a better understanding of it. And when they finish that process, they'll come back and they'll say, this is what went wrong. But at the end of the day, the people that fund them, that fund their campaigns, are going to be the corporations and wealthy donors. And you can't get around adhering to their policies to a great degree.
Yeah, look, I say the Liberal Party is actually less hostage to donors than the Labor Party. And that there is nobody who is more like the babe with its lips attached to the mother's breast than Albo is to the trade union movement. And if you want to see a party which is a ventriloquist dummy for a vested corporate interest, it is the Australian Labor Party. The Liberal Party's donor base is more fragmented, more fractured. I say so the Liberal Party's problem
lack of any good policy at all ever.
It's fractured now.
Yeah. It's the problem for the party, and I confess, I apologise to our beautiful host, Michael, because the Northern Beaches branch of the Libertarian Party is holding a branch meeting tonight in the Master Builders Club at DY. And I've got a group of guys downstairs waiting to drive me there, and I need to go get in the car. But
are they part of the Master Builders Union, Ross? What do you call the Master Builders Association? A union of sorts?
Yeah, they are. I've got the Honourable John Ruddock, MLC, who is in the car. He's just called me on the phone. He's no doubt about to unload on me for why I'm late. John Ruddock. I've got Michael West and punter Konrad. I've got Steph, who is the multi-utility former political staffer from all parties. We're talking to Michael's global audience of several 100,000 people, and you've just sort of barged in. So the question, I'm being asked the question, is Sussan Ley good for the Liberal Party and good for Australia? So I'm going to let you give the final speech from me. You've got 30 seconds.
Going backwards, and they need to do what the Canadian political parties do, and then need to elect their leader by a mass convention of all their members. This is why when Justin Trudeau resigned on the 6th of January, Mark Carney wasn't officially in place for over 2 months later, because they had TV debates, they had about 300,000 people voting. It's a policy slugfest, it's a popularity contest, and that's the way they've been doing it in Canada now for several decades. And Australia's party room ballot is a 19th century relic, and it's giving us very mediocre conviction-free leaders like Sussan Ley.
Okay, there you go, boys and girls.
There we go.
A word
That was
from my
definitive.
sponsor, the Honourable John Ruddy.
You can always
Okay,
worry
I
on your
got to
mate.
go.
Cheers, mate.
Love
Have a
yous
good night.
all.
Thank you, Ross.
You too.
See you, Ross.
Good on you, Ross.
Well,
Let's
gee,
get
if
on
you
to a
could leave
couple
your
of
laptop open
Patreons
for
then,
the
Josh.
recording, mate, that would be great.
Wow.
What's up?
Not a,
Okay,
not
one
a
down.
horrible idea. I think if we did what old mate on the phone said, we probably
John
get a
Ruddock,
damn
you.
sight more charismatic leaders. That's for sure.
Have you told Ross to keep his computer on,
Yeah,
Joshy?
yeah, I have. So
All
hopefully
right.
that
So-
stays to download.
sorry,
so I can
Konrad,
upload
what was
things
that?
later?
Oh no, I was just saying that let's not a like. There's two ways to go with how our like. Part of me loves the fact that we don't have a charisma competition to elect our leaders, so we do get kind of really mediocre lack of charisma. Because the problem with charismatic people is they are so good at selling you BS, whereas none of our politicians could sell their way out of a wet paper bag. I don't know if that's the saying, but. I think I can see you'd probably get better leaders, more charismatic leaders by doing something like that. But I kind of like these mediocre milquetoast leaders because then they just have to try and sell me policies. And I guess my question to Ross before he went was, if the Liberal Party aren't beholden to corporate donors, like you kind of indicate, Westy, where the hell's who's their policy for? Who are they writing no policy for? Who are they like wanting to give mad tax breaks to large corporations for? Like, who is it for?
We don't talk about that, Konrad.
Ross comes from the school
know?
of union antipathy, Konrad, and that's the issue. But you know, the most powerful union in the country is the Business Council of Australia, whose members are the top chief executives in the country, who they're the only unionists that don't pay their own union fees. And frankly, the Libs, I take Ross's point that as a collective, the union movement and the Labor Party, that is a serious issue for the right of politics, and they view that as being the enemy and that kind of thing. But still, the Liberal Party is definitely beholden to their donors. But as he points out, they're more disparate because they're all large corporations and business associations like the Master Builders Association, where Ross is off to tonight. But it's always useful to have a right winger on to get that view of what's going on the right side of politics. You can see Ross desperately hoping that there's going to be a splintering and they'll all come his way to the libertarian movement, which he regards as more fair income in terms of capitalism.
Well, to be honest,
it's unfortunate that hasn't played out.
No, it hasn't yet.
If we go the way of what Argentina with Milei, like,
well, he made the point that charisma is the point. I think you made that point that there is a lack of charisma, but there's nothing to stop a leader with charisma coming on the scene. We're not going to get the Donald, hopefully, but you know, there's nothing to stop that happening in Australian politics. There's money on the right side of politics.
Yeah, but they're two different issues, right? We're talking about donors, we're talking about unions, we're talking about all sorts of things that, you know, fund parties, and then we're also talking about the leader and whether the leader is any good. And I think that they're very different. You can't just push them together because you wish that something was working more in your favor historically when it isn't. So, you know, unfortunately, that's where we are. And like, as I said earlier, you know, Sussan, you know, is a moderate, and we'll just have to see what she does. So there you go. But I guess, yeah, the donors thing is interesting. There was some talk about reforming. I'm sure punters would be very on top of this because I think it was a crossbench Teal issue. Donation reform. I'm not quite up to speed on that exactly, but I know that there was a bill put up and it didn't get through. Was that a Labor bill? Is there still a push for that, Konrad? What's going on?
Well, I think I took my talking points from Westy on it, and my understanding was Labor came up with a bill only if that's the election donation caps that was supposedly introduced. And they introduced caps above what's being donated right now. So it literally stops no one from donating. Then they introduced spending caps, which seem to only inhibit the independents. But I know Friendly Geordies has an issue with that and thinks that I think Westy's characterization is wrong. So I need to get Westy and Friendly Geordies to have a battle over whether it's good or not.
No, well, Jordan, I haven't heard Jordan's perspective on this, but what it does is it's quite complicated, actually. It's a very big bill. And if you want to make something difficult to understand to try to push sneaky things through. This bill does it. And what it does, it lifts the caps to, is it 80 or 90 million for each of the major parties, the Liberal and Labor parties. And yet it imposes, I forget the size of the cap, but $3 million, quite small caps on independents. Now, what that means is that as a party, if you've got the benefit of tenure, you've got this party machinery which has existed for decades, which Liberal and Labor do, and you lift their spending caps, they've got more to spend. But what they can do, which the independents can't do, is shift money. That they can shift money around. They go, oh, look at that marginal in southeast Queensland. We're going to shift money where we don't need it, because we don't need it in this safe Liberal or national seat. We'll shift it in and we'll fight these nasty Greens and independents that are looking like they're a bit ominous in that other seat. So they can shift money around. So they have more money to advertise already. They have more money to buy votes effectively through digital all avenues. And then they can shift that money around to troubled places, which helps them to repel the fracturing of politics in Australia.
I'm not sure they're supposed to be able to do that. As far as shifting money from different electorates to funnel it in, I think that there might be something in place to stop that. But obviously, whatever it is underfunded, or it's not working very well. I mean, it's hard to trace money in the first place. But go on, Konrad. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. I just thought on that, like, I thought that they could advertise for their candidate, and that's a capped thing. But then they can advertise for the party. And that's kind of like a massive countrywide cap. So you can just run Labor Party posters, which, let's face it, most punters are just going Labor. No one knows who their bloody local member is. I had to look mine up, bloody Pat Conroy. But,
it's too hard anyway, because then you've got like the exclusive brethren who's, handing out how to vote cards and doing this and that chores for the Liberal Party. I think that's who it was this time down in Victoria, but, they've been seen before in other states. So, it's basically a free for all, right? So... yeah.
And it's a big deal. Sorry,
Yep.
guys. Move on to the next Patreon question as well while we're here, because it's quite kind of related in a sense. So on Patreon, we had our member Concerned Citizen ask, there's a comment in the way. So, and I'll throw this to Michael first, but do you believe that the Greens are obstructionists, based on what we were talking about before as well? So do you believe the Greens are obstructionists to passing legislation as Labor claim them to be?
That seemed to damage them. A lot of political pundits said that damaged them, particularly, the housing obstructionism with not letting the HAF initiative get through and ganging up with the Liberals to stop it. I mean, my view's quite simple. It's just a real realpolitik view, is that politics is about horse trading. It's about compromise. The Greens' job is to be there and represent the voters that elected them, whether that be in the Senate or elsewhere. And that's what they do. And there was a strong view in progressive circles that there wasn't enough money being spent, and that the policy in taking a loan it was a complicated sort of neoliberal sort of policy. Mind you, it was more than the Liberals had, but the Greens felt it wasn't enough. They were simply representing their electors. So I think the issue for them is perception as much as anything. It's how much do you want to be branded as obstructionist, really, do you just keep on caving?
How much more can they be branded as obstructionist, though?
Well, not much. You see, this is the other thing. They are up against it because Liberal and Labor policies are closer to each other than either of those parties are to the Greens. And so therefore and the duopoly media doesn't do the Greens any favour. Like, most people would know what the Greens' policy on multinational tax avoidance was, but even though this is the richest sector to get money from to fund Australia's future, it's as simple as this. Things like sovereign wealth fund, or what you talk about, Konrad, all the time, which is, fossil fuel export taxes and taxing the gas companies and so on, the multinationals. This is incredibly important. The richest institutions in our society have the most ability to pay the most tax, but pro rata, they pay the least. There's a lot of misinformation around this. And I think when the Greens say things like, billionaires, it's tax billionaires, it sounds a bit, they get calumny from the duopoly, both the media duopoly and the political duopoly, class warfare and so on. But the reality is that some of these billionaires, like Gina and Andrew Forrest, they actually, we don't know what their personal tax situation is, but Andrew, they paid. I mean, I've looked at their accounts, Hancock Prospecting and Fortescue. Twiggy owns about a third of Fortescue, and they paid $2 billion, I think, in tax last year. $2 billion. Now, companies like Exxon and Chevron, these foreign companies, have paid nothing for years. So Twiggy Forrest has single-handedly funded the ABC, and Gina would be, because the ABC is 1.3 billion or something like that, with the tax from Fortescue. So I think when you just...
That's a good point.
When you... And Gina pays a lot of tax. She whines about it and about wages and so on, but that's why she whines about it, because she has to pay a lot of tax.
Well, the company's Australian-owned at least, right?
The company's Australian-owned. It's not a foreign multinational.
Yeah.
So the people that are pillaging Australia are mostly, and I've been through them all, whether it's drug companies or whether it's, hydrocarbon companies or whatever they are, insurers, the global international insurers that operate here pay very little tax too. So it's the foreign multinationals where the money is. And for some reason, no government can tax them properly. They tried in 2015, did not a bad job. But of course, the tax lawyers and the big four are always steps ahead. But the Greens do have robust policies on this stuff. I don't agree with them, their approach, but we never saw that telegraphed. All we heard is, the Greens are anti-Semitic, class warfare, they're Hamas, they're this.
That's all the Greens put out for the most part as well. It's not like they put taxing multinationals at the forefront. And I mean, we might see more of that because now they're the crossbench.
They put it out a bit, but they just were ignored because you see...
Algorithms.
I missed it.
What are you going to do?
It could be, I think algorithms probably plays an increasingly large part of it. Exactly. But also the mainstream just bashed them the whole time. So,
and this is the
to go to obstructionism, I think it's a thing, and they probably should have caved in on housing earlier, but they were right in their assessment, in my view, that not enough was being done to address the housing. I mean, the housing crisis is the biggest crisis. 2/3 of Australians own their own house, funnily enough. I wouldn't have thought it's that high, but it is, and a third don't. And so it's the third that don't, who are the renters, they're severely handicapped by the existing policies and so on, and housing affordability. But of course, they don't have a majority of the votes. So it's all, John Howard used to say, the 50.1% rule. You adjust your policy based on, will it get you more than 50% of the votes?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I'd love to hear what you think about housing, Konrad. I don't think that anybody has a plan that's strong enough, but we'll see. With this majority, I don't know.
Well, I think that's the cynicism with which these stories are being told. The stories about why the Greens lost, the stories of them being obstructionist. If they team up with the Liberal Party, they're obstructionist. But when Labor team up with the Liberal Party to shaft independents, or at least that's what every single independent thinks. So, that's not obstructionist. And you got to work out the political calculus, right? Are you going to be branded obstructionist whether you are or you're not? The Greens ended up passing Labor's half-baked, half-assed, not housing policy fixes. Every economist I've looked at goes, we are effed. If both parties, if we follow their trajectory on housing, it's 70 years before wages, if wages continue to go up, will kind of catch up. So the policy is crap. And then the Greens kind of go, hey, this is crap. And kind of don't pass it to say, you promised to do something on housing. This is not enough, blah, blah, blah. I wonder if it's the same with Albo and the story of him being lambasted by the Murdoch press. So he kind of kowtows to them and goes, I'll try and give them what they want so they don't attack me. At some level, they'll attack you for that anyway. And so is it just a war on rhetoric and a war on story and who can convince people the most? Because we've left the realm of looking at policy and going, is it objectively a good policy? Should it be passed? The politics.
I think
might be bringing us back to that era.
This election is testament to the fact Labor's emphatic victory. I thought to give Labor the thumbs up here. It was because the electorate, despite all the "you're a liar," "I'm a liar," "you're a liar," "no, you're a liar," is sort of routine, and the bagging of people and the xenophobia and the media hysteria and the distractions. The fact is, when people turned up to give their vote in that week or two, they voted for a steady hand with our votes. As simple as that. They went, well, he's come across as the most credible manager of this economy, which goes to hip pocket things mostly. Things like fossil fuels, Palestine, etc., played a part, certainly in certain areas, but mostly it's housing affordability.
Not that the Labor Party was supportive of Palestine, but
no.
Yeah, I think that the tables have turned on the hate media a little bit. Yeah,
a lot better.
This could be the election where that Sky News stuff doesn't work anymore. I mean, the electorate rejected it, so
I think that's what it's telling us. I mean, if you look at the result for Murdoch's properties, his media assets campaigned relentlessly for the coalition. They were just hysterical about it. And
before you go more into that point, Michael, that actually ties into another Patreon question that we got, which is on the exact same topic. So hold your answer for that one. But we had one from Mark here, what is the panel's assessment of the wider media coverage of the campaign? So that despite the coalition getting near wall-to-wall, uncritical coverage, and that Labor's negatives weren't really covered properly, I've had to turn to more independent media for better coverage. So
love to hear that.
Yeah, like was Murdoch kind of hyper-focusing on Labor negatives? Were they pushing the coalition too hard? Like what kind of fell apart here?
Well, I think that's a real thing. Just hopping quickly, it's a real thing, and it's just demographics. It's maths again, because people under 40 aren't tuning into the nightly news and the 24-hour news cycle as much as going to independents or social media influencers or whoever. That's the reality of people don't read newspapers much anymore. So this is just a numbers game that is only going to grow. And so it's going to get more vehement. But I was just quite impressed with the Australian population for seeing through the fact that the coalition was completely awash, didn't have anything in the way of policy.
The Liberal Party, not the Nats.
Party.
Thank
the
you.
Liberal Party. Well, the Nats, I guess, to give them credit.
National
we held
Party.
all our seats.
You held.
I'm meant to be the National Party.
You're calling yourself
we on that point there. The National Party, right?
I mean they.
This is what's so interesting about the whole National Liberal coalition. I mean, from my punt perspective a while back, I was like, the Nationals are killing the Liberal Party. And the Nationals kind of dictate what the Liberal Party have done, and then they hold all their seats. And then I guess in the party room, they go, look, we didn't lose seats.
Yeah, well, you may think that, but let's go back to the question.
Policies don't work in any Liberal seat ever.
But that goes to this steady hand issue, because regardless of what their policies are, they plod along and they don't flip-flop the whole time and get caught, prevaricating. They go, yep, this is our policy, and we...
predictable. They're much more upfront than the Libs a lot of the time.
I think they're far too close to big mining and not as close to the farmers as they could be.
For sure.
The rural growth, the vote is a conservative vote. They stick to that, and as you say, they've held. And the Libs have really bled heavily, and a lot of it is flip-flopping. And it goes to this idea that in America you can have this huge populist movement with Trump, where the media thing dominates so much. But I think Australians see through a lot of that stuff. And I think Trump did damage Dutton a bit. His timing, that is. If Trump was just getting voted in, they would have got a lot more votes because he hadn't gone off on his bizarre tariff frolic at that point.
Sucks to be Trump. There's a part of that question there that says uncritical coverage for the Liberal Party meant that Labor's negatives weren't really covered properly. I think you guys would have a better opinion on that, just to close us out here.
I think.
Do you think that the Labor Party negatives weren't put up because, and Anthony Albanese really grave rocked, didn't he? It was a small campaign. He wasn't putting much out there because he didn't want to get attacked by the mainstream media. I think that has proven that, that right-wing extreme media is sort of on its way out. Hopefully Murdoch gets the message too. We'll wait and see. But maybe there wasn't enough criticism of Albo that was legitimate. What do you think?
Look, I think there was quite... Yeah, maybe. I think there was quite a bit of criticism, but you know what? And this is probably a bit of an elitist, not a very nice opinion, but I just think people get the vibe that the Libs they're not exactly, as I gently put it, the deepest talent pool around. I mean, the Labor people, and you can criticise all of them, and we do for various things, you know, Dreyfus and Penny Wong and Albo and Jim Chalmers, very effective treasurer, and they're just smarter. And they stuck to their guns in a policy sense. They weren't up to much. I mean, we bashed them the whole time on policy timidity, but the fact is, it's the steady hand thing, and the idea that, look, do we really want all these other people, these bumbling crew over in the Libs running the show? I mean, I just don't. I think there's a vibe going on out there, and Australians have picked it up and gone, nah, too risky. Labor has its faults. If you're too far to the left or too far to the right, you know, you're going to be disgruntled with Labor for something, for sure. I mean, they didn't escape criticism. We hopped into them all the time for a whistleblower treatment and whatever. But at the end of the day, you look at it and go, well, what's going to be worse? You know, you go down, you only get one chance every 3 years, you cast your vote. Who's going to be worse?
Westy, you're independent media. This is why I read your stuff, because you say, hey, here's the Labor Party and here's why their policy sucks. And what I think to the question on like...
Well, that's why you've been so successful too on new media, mate, because you've challenged the establishment narratives. It's as simple as that. And it's credible that you challenge them. So it is growing, but it just didn't reflect in third parties.
And I think when we're looking at classic media coverage, we're looking at this entrenched beauty pageant dance between the criticisms of Labor are only ever sanctioned by the Liberal Party attack dogs. And the Liberal Party attack dogs are never going to critique Labor on substance, because they're further to the ridiculous side. Like, they have no policy. They had nothing to sort of stand on. They can't attack Labor for locking up whistleblowers because they do it 10x more. At least Albo got Assange out eventually, right? That was never going to happen under a Liberal Party. And so when we look at the media coverage, I think it could seem like Labor's flaws weren't really covered, because the only way in which media critique the other side is to say, oh, well, they said you're bad economic managers. And everyone looked at Albo and went, well, if you're the standard by which we're going to measure economic management, you say budget surplus is what we want. Oh, well, he got us some of those things. Yeah. Whereas there's no actual critique, which is why I think YouTube and the next generations are desperate for substantive critique, which, once again, blow our own horns. That's what kind of independent media does.
Well, see, the structure of the media is the problem, though, you know, because still with the mainstream, what happens is you've got the press gallery that controls the Prime Minister or the PMC. They control the news flow of significant national public interest announcements, policy, or even, you know, propaganda fluff, but they control that, and they give it to 5 or 10 journalists in the main media orgs, and then, even though a lot of people are following independent media and social media a lot more, the fact is the 24-hour news cycle, we get sucked into it all the time too. Konrad, you've got to admit, I mean, even on the fringe as an independent, because what happens is the ABC and the 7 and 9 breakfast show people, they come in, they read the Daily Telegraph and the Herald and the Australian, and they just write whatever has been dropped to them. So that stranglehold on the 24/7 thing is still, so the talking points that last for that 24-hour news cycle are still controlled by a machine, and we just come in and bash them up later for it, you know, but and challenge it, and that's why you've got a third of the population not voting for the majors, and that I think will have to grow, but certainly, I mean, it's I wouldn't say been reversed, it's just that Labor is just 94 seats, you know, I mean, that is enormous. I mean, it's a commendation to their savviness as operators, as much as it is the Liberal Party's failure, I think. You know, they didn't.
Well, I mean, Labor spent a long time in the wilderness, as it is already, so they had a very competent and patient cabinet, and, you know, even people in reserve. I mean, they've got so many people now. They've got the youngest senator ever, a 21-year-old who was, you know, an unwinnable slot for Labor on a ticket somewhere, which is just incredible. But I mean, it is actually also Labor. I mean, as far as integrity goes, you mentioned Julian Assange. We don't know that the Liberals wouldn't have done that because it wasn't a deal with America. So who knows? Maybe America was the one.
Barnaby
calling the shots
Joyce
the whole
was
time.
very pro
But-
Assange, so it
Yeah,
was
that's
on the
true.
right as
He
well.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Monique Wyman went over there as well. I know that. That's true. But I mean, they've dumped Dreyfus now. We haven't seen very much with the knack, so there's that part. And I mean, I don't know
We'll
what
never see
involvement
anything
Dreyfus
with
would
the
have had.
knack.
But, you know, well,
That's done
now
and
he's
done.
not
Snack.
Attorney General anymore, right? It's now Michelle Rowland. So I don't know if that had anything to do with Labor's decision there. But certainly, I think that they surprised everybody with how much that they won. They're winning so much that we're sick of it already.
But are they winning,
The
or is
media
the
narrative
Liberal
didn't
Party
propose them
losing?
that much.
And
Well,
And I
before you start, Konrad, mate,
Yeah.
because we're going to start to wind down very, very soon. That is exactly the question that I have from one of our last Patreon members, because we've got a shout out to our patrons, of course. Just below, do you think that Labor won the election versus Liberal LNP lost the election?
Ooh.
How do you think
Here we
lost
go.
LNP votes shuffled? Did it go to Labor, independents, third-party candidates? And can you give us some analysis around the loss of the 2 leader seats? So I'm going to answer that in 2 parts, guys. First of all, exactly what you were about to say, Konrad. Did Labor win, or did just Liberals and Nationals lose, or the coalition lose?
Yeah.
We'll start with that one.
The answer to that question is very important, because if the media reports it like, oh, we all loved Albo, blah, 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 that was really good, he had really competent, I just don't see it reflected in his primary vote, because the independent vote continually grew. And then the analysis I've seen is like, in a 3-horse race, what's interesting is what happens to Liberal Party preferences. They'll never preference the Greens. Sometimes they might preference the independent, but if they eliminate their Liberal Party, then the Labor Party is likely, like, it does interesting stuff. And so if the independent party vote and the third minor party vote continues to grow, then I would still be worried if I was Labor, because there's still competition that they have to be fighting.
They're doing their best to keep the duopoly with that latest set of electoral reforms. But yeah, I think it's a combination of both. Labor won and steady hand, and they managed the economy reasonably, and they did a lot in small things in different areas, the creditable things, and there was just no competition. You know, it was Bradbury on the other side. Steph, final thoughts?
Yep, I agree with you, Michael. I think Dutton reneged on a bunch of policies. He was never likable in the first place. There were some people coming out from the Liberal Party anonymously saying, you know, we didn't think he was electable at the start when we made him opposition leader, and, you know, it turns out that he wasn't. So there's that. I think Labor copped a lot of hits from, you know, they can't manage money. Well, you know, turns out that the Liberal Party opposed the tax cuts that Albanese had up, and then didn't offer any economic policy under Angus Taylor. So there's that. There are 3-cornered contests between the Libs and Labor and the Greens. So it's not true that preferences don't switch between Liberal and the Greens. I mean, that's how we got the Teals in the first place. But I think that Albo won this one. I think that Scott Morrison lost it for sure last time. I think it was a bit of both this time.
Good on you. Well,
And
thanks
that
for
kind of ties
everybody
up to
for
the second
tuning
part
in.
of it. Yeah, that
wrap?
ties up to the second part of that question, guys, and we'll end it on that. So this election obviously was the very first time that a sitting opposition leader lost his seat. But in fact, I would say that 2 opposition leaders lost their seats. Adam Bandt lost the seat of Melbourne. He's no longer the leader of the Greens, and I believe they're going to go to the party room tomorrow to vote a new leader. So to wrap up the theme of this election, post-election stream analysis that we're doing on leaders, who do you guys think are going to step up into the new Greens leadership role? And is there any good choices? I might start with Konrad.
I already lost some money that I put on Angus Taylor, because I thought the Liberal Party surely haven't learned their lesson. And so I lost money on that. So if I was to put money again with that track record, I'd go with Sarah Hanson-Young. I reckon they might go, maybe we'll step back to our maybe tree-hugging greenie roots, and maybe she's more that vibe. Adam Bandt was a bit too, you know, economic policy focused.
Steph, any thoughts? I think you won some money actually on that.
Oh, on the Liberal Party, on the leadership, yeah, I had Sussan. I'm from Albury, so, you know, for that reason, it's like a football team. I guess, you know, I had to go with that. But for the Greens, for me, it's got to be Larissa Waters. Shy has been a target in the past from not just the right-wing media, but I mean in Murdoch and stuff. And Like, it would be difficult, I think, for them to put her up, especially with a woman leader. I mean, not that we don't have one in Sussan Ley as well, but I think Larissa Waters would probably be the best choice. She's been in Parliament for a really long time. David Shoebridge has been put up as well, but I think he's more needed in Senate estimates because he is a gun. He might be the best one in there in estimates. So I'm going to put on Larissa Waters. If I could bet on
Oh, you got me, Steph. I'll change my vote. I'm with you.
Fuck yeah. Oh, sorry.
The other one's
New
Marine
information,
Faruqi.
mate.
I don't think they'll elect Marine, but I think probably she'd be too controversial. But I think Shy might get it. She's not without her critics, obviously, but she is a very effective communicator. And but then again, how would I know in a three-cornered contest like this? You're just not going to know where the votes are going to fall. It's impossible. It's not like saying, you know, there are two people here and we think that person's going to get it. You've got three, so the votes are going to fall away from one side to the other. I think she may get it, but who knows? That's a pure punt.
I say bring
so Shy and Larissa. Yeah.
No, you got.
What about you, Josh? Who are you going for in the Greens?
Look, I mean, I've got my personal preferences. If I was to say, I think Larissa's a good choice. Shoebridge is a good choice, but he's too important in Senate, so it's realistically not going to work. I'm not a fan of Marine Faruqi from a punter's perspective, in a sense, and I don't think she would do well, especially with the Murdoch media as well. Being a woman of color and having a couple of controversial moments after the last couple of years, so I don't think. Despite them being number one on the Senate, from memory, I don't think they're going to be
just
pushed up into that role.
Choice, it would be difficult.
So you think it should go woman and Greens should go white bloke?
No, I think David is obviously brilliant, and perhaps
it'll be a woman. Leader. That's what Shoebridge said on.
He's only been there he hasn't got a party basis yet, because when you go into a party room, it's like going into a new gang, you know. He's just a new gang member, and he's very valuable in prosecuting stuff in the Senate estimates and so on. Very good media communicator, and so I don't think I think it's just too early for him. But who knows?
No, he was on Q&A last night on the ABC on Monday, and he said it would be a woman. So
okay. And I think there's a really interesting optics question there, or not optics, but the functional. Part of that is if they were to run a Senate candidate as the party leader, does that affect anything with the election? Like, does the sitting member have to be a federal member? That's not the case, right?
It would be up to their constitution. Each party has a constitution. I don't think it matters if you're not running for prime minister. Deputy leaders can probably be from the Senate. There's been a few cases in the major parties. For the Greens, it doesn't really matter as much. And they only have one choice from the lower house now. So I would put money on it that it would be in the upper house, not that this is a betting channel.
Get your punts in now.
I don't do that.
Rock and roll, guys. I think that's a good time to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us on the West Report Live. My name is Josh. I'm the producer here, working on the cameras behind the scenes. Michael West Media here is completely community funded, and by extension, I guess Punters Politics would be as well. So if you guys are interested in seeing more of this kind of stuff, we're taking some risks and trying some new content and new formats. Feel free to jump onto our Patreon below for a little as like a coffee a month. We really try to bring the news to the masses. And so because we are completely reader funded, we don't have any corporate influence. We don't have any big corporate donors or gas lobbyists to tell us what to do. So thank you so much to the viewers for jumping on. I think we had about 700 people tuning in at once. So that's going to be about 20,000 views for this stream. Thank you so much. We're going to go around the panel and go any closing remarks. But Punter, Mr. Konrad, do you want to have any closing remarks for the stream?
No, I'm good. Thanks for tuning in, Punts. Maybe we do this more. It's kind of fun. Cheers, Punts.
Steph Dog.
You can't just swear and pretend that you're not swearing, Konrad. It's not okay.
What do you mean? It's a P. Nothing like it.
It's got a P. It's got a P in front of it. Yeah. Look, the election result, no one saw it coming. People will be creating narratives left, right, and center as to why, and reading the tea leaves and insiders and stuff like that. I'm not particularly interested in what the mainstream media has to say about that stuff anymore. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, support independent media, which is all of us here. So that's about it.
And thanks to the audiences. Fantastic. Keep us going, and we'll continue to throw up a bit more content. Thanks fellow panelists, and we'll catch you in the next round.
Rock and roll. Cool. Again, thank you so much to our viewers for tuning in today. Like we said before, if you want to support us on Patreon, you can in the link below, I believe in the description and the comments. Like I said, we are 100% reader funded. So you guys are our bosses. So we really appreciate your contributions. Signing off. We'll see you on the next one.